Welcome to Room to Grow with your ally Chad, a podcast where a white privileged male, me, invites people to teach him as much as they can about the sensitive subjects that are prominent in today's society, such as racism, women's rights, addiction, and mental health. This podcast is for open-minded people who want the information that is out there but don't know where to look. My name is Chad Moores. Join me and let's learn and grow together. Hello and welcome to Room to Grow with your ally Chad. Today we are joined by Beth Lyon. Do I say that right?
Lyon.
See, I thought I might get it wrong. Beth Lyon, author of Not Good Enough for You. Welcome, Beth. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Yep. So your mother or mother-in-law is over there watching your baby right now?
Well, she should have been here. However, time gets the best of us, so.
Yeah. So what's your baby doing now?
She is with my husband, most likely doing music on his guitar.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't, I can sing, but I've never been good with instruments. I've done the drums, the guitar, and the piano, and I'm terrible at all of them, every single one of them. So please give us a quick synopsis of this book, if you can.
Sure. So it's about a new mom named Jackie, and she kind of has a tough decision to make when she's 20 weeks pregnant, when she gets some news about her pregnancy that nothing is really healthy. The heart, the kidneys, the stomach, the brain is like a list of ailments of her baby. So she has to decide, is it worth my baby's risk? Is it worth my risk? And it kind of goes through Jackie's life of pregnancy. And obviously Jackie decides to keep the baby. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of goes past, through the life of having a child with those needs as well as special needs, because it does revolve around Down syndrome. That's why the book is blue and yellow, as those are the colors for Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of just more of self-acceptance of trying to juggle everything of parenthood, as well as thinking I am enough, even though I think I'm not good enough.
Right. And so another question, and this is kind of a hard question, but I am interested to find out about it a little bit, is well, let me get to that later, actually. So this is inspired by a true story. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the inspiration for this book? And considering that it is fictional, how much research you had to go into to write this book?
So I based it off of my daughter, Lorelai, mm-hmm. as she did have a list of the same ailments. And I really didn't need to do much research just because I went through most of it, which is why it was very easy writing it for me. And really, the research was just going back a year when I was pregnant and just making sure that a lot of it was medically correct.
Yeah. That's understandable. So the genes that the main character has, Jackie, is that something mm-hmm. that you also live with? Yes. Very interesting. Mm-hmm. And that's I enjoyed this book thoroughly. So I got to read it, and I know that a lot of people, they go to it, they have interviews and they just like, oh, tell us about the book, but they didn't actually read it. And I wanted to make sure that I read every word before I had you on. It's just, it's very interesting. The second Gilmore Girls was mentioned. I knew why a lot of the names were in there. Like, the husband's name is Dean. I am a Gilmore guy. Mm-hmm. I am a Gilmore guy. I enjoyed that show very, very much. I've watched it quite a few times. And then you have Suki, which did you ever meet my sugar glider, Suki? when I had her at Middlesex?
No, I did not.
Do you know anything about Suki? About
No.
I had a sugar glider. It was like it's like an Australian marsupial. It's something you can like literally fit it in your pocket. They just kind of will sleep anywhere, and then they come out and they'll just like hang out on your shoulder, and they look kind of like flying squirrels because they can glide. That's why they're called sugar gliders. And her name was Suki, based off of Suki from Gilmore Girls. So when I saw that, I was just like, oh man, good connection there. But I used to bring Suki to all of my rehearsals when I went to Middlesex. Unfortunately, she had an incident, so she passed
Don't
away.
remember Suki. I feel like I would remember Suki
I
because we
know.
spent a lot of time in theater.
I know. We were in that theater literally 24/7. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and I'd go to the theater and I'd be like the last to leave. I always like I would like sit outside and wait for Karen to come over and unlock the door so I could just be in there
Yeah.
and just go over my lines or whatever. I spent as much time in there as I could. But yeah, Suki was with me like 24/7 for one of the years that I went there, but I guess that must not have been a time that you were in that area. So I appreciate the detail that you went into when it came to the childbirth. It is not talked about at all. Most women need so much time to recover, but when it's mentioned, it's not really mentioned by other mothers that have already gone through it. When you know, like at the baby shower, for instance, like everybody's just like, "Oh, you're not gonna sleep for the first year at least," you know, but they don't tell you that you're almost bedridden to a certain extent and taking care of
Mhm.
this newborn. You're wearing diapers, you have ice packs on your areas, and the bladder control, I mean, is completely gone. And you know, they don't talk about that stuff. I had no idea that my wife was going to go through that when we had our daughter. And I mean, I was there for her and I was able to help her out, but I really had no idea that that was going to be the case. Now, of course, there are mothers out there that didn't go through so much healing. I saw somebody have a child, and I think within the first week of childbirth, they went on a hike with their
Oh
newborn.
my
Like,
God.
went up an actual mountain. Like, you could see them, like, with the clouds, and, like, you could see, like, this. I wish I knew who it was, but I was like, that is just so ridiculous. How did you hike within a week of
I
having your child?
I know someone who started working out only 4 weeks after giving childbirth.
It's
But
crazy.
every like labor is different too because even my sister-in-law, she pushed for a while and it also ended in a C-section for her too. I don't know how long she pushed for, but it's like every person is different. Mind you, I'm horrible when it comes to pain control. So, that's just me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine the what what the women are having to go through. And yeah, I think even my wife didn't know. I mean, and she was a doctor. She is a doctor, and you know, she went and she's delivered children and stuff like that, but I'm not even sure at that point she knew that she was going to be going through this stuff. One of the things that she does, and I think this is it's so wonderful for my wife to do this, when she gets invited to a baby shower, everybody that goes to the baby shower, no matter who you are, you always bring like a couple of onesies and a book and a thing of diapers and all that kind of stuff. But what my wife does, yeah, she'll get like one book, one outfit, but then everything else that she gives is for the mom. She gets, I don't know if you've ever heard of Frida Mom.
Yes, I have.
Oh my gosh. And she,
So good. Actually, someone got that for me before I went into labor and I loved it.
I mean, that
So,
was literally a godsend because, you know, I understand that the baby shower is technically for the baby, but the mom needs some attention. And I very much appreciate that my wife does that. So when the person does go through childbirth, then they'll probably message her and just be like, "That was awesome, thank you." So,
yes, I'm actually the person who got that for me. I messaged her. I was like, "Thank you so much. I've been using it daily."
yeah, I think it's important, and it's something that, as I said, is not discussed. And you going into the details without um any filter was really appreciated. I think I'm hoping that after this interview, people that are thinking about getting pregnant or have been pregnant can relate to it, and I think it's a great way for people to kind of be prepared for that. And I loved that. I really did. So it spoke to
Yes,
me.
I'm the same way. That's why I wrote it, because I did not know half the things I knew going into pregnancy. And I was like, why doesn't anyone ever talk about this? And
Yeah.
also, I don't have a filter, which is why it's not filtered. So it's all me.
That is true. I mean, you did say that I've aged since the last time you saw me, like literally the second we got onto this call. So, yeah, that filter. It's okay, though. It's okay. I actually think that there are many people that don't need a filter. I would say that you were one of those people because, and the nice thing about people that don't have filters is that I always find that the people that don't have filters, when they do say something nice, you know that they actually mean it. There are some people that are like super sweet and they say nice things all the time, and it's like, yeah, well, that's just Anita being Anita. But then when there are people that can afford to not have a filter because they are genuinely a nice person, then when they do say something, you can like, oh wow, I really appreciated that because I know that they wouldn't have said that if they didn't mean it. So that's always good. So tell me a little bit about this journey where in the book specifically, when Jackie does find out about these illnesses and the Down syndrome and all that kind of stuff, that kind of decision, deciding to move forward with the pregnancy, must be a very difficult thing. Now, do you think that that's something that you, how did you deal with that? How did you decide to move forward with that in the book? Because it is a controversy, especially right now when it comes to abortions and stuff like that. That's something that we're all kind of discussing at this very moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of was like, well, what would I do? I personally, a life is a life to me. I personally would not take a life, especially at 20 weeks. But
Mm-hmm.
some people might be like, well, what would happen? Because especially at 20 weeks, a baby's pretty, I mean, it's pretty well developed at that time.
Mm-hmm.
They have their whole body. They have pretty much all of their, insides going on, even though everything is developing. Jackie, I mean, Jackie's kind of that spur of the moment kind of character. She really didn't think. She was like, well, she's my daughter. I want to keep her.
Yeah.
So that was Jackie's decision. She was like, I'm not going to, it wasn't a decision to her. She just was going to do it no matter what.
Yeah, and I find that, people that haven't gone through it might just be able to say to themselves, well, I would just, get rid of it or whatever, get rid of her, get rid of him and stuff like that. And then there's also, but they haven't gone through it. They haven't gone through it. So they can't really talk about it. It's kind of like one of those things where somebody might be talking about racism or something like that, I've mentioned this before in my podcast before, is that like there's this comedian Dane Cook who was one of his jokes. He was talking to one of his black friends, and Dane was just like, yeah, I can appreciate that, or I can understand that. He's like, no, you can't understand it, you can't appreciate it. And it's true. So I mean, we want to learn about it, but until or unless we deal with it, what kind of opinions can we really have, right?
Exactly. You don't know what you're going to go through in the moment, because especially in Jackie's perspective, in that moment, she didn't think. She just acted and was like, well, what are you going to say about me keeping my baby? I'm going to just do it.
Yeah, and I remember having the conversation with my wife before we found out the sex, before anything. I think we were a couple of days out of our appointment where we were able to get that blood work done, where you can find out if there's any kind of mental mental issues going on and stuff like that. But you can also, I mean, a lot of people do it just so they can find out the sex way earlier.
Hmm.
And we thought about it, and ultimately we decided we were going to keep it regardless. So we were going to keep her regardless of whatever was going on there. So we decided we didn't want to have to face that decision, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We just, it was like, we would have hated to have gotten the results and then seen something like Down syndrome or heart issues or whatever it might have been, and then had to have made that decision right then and there. I feel like it was too difficult. So we decided that if anything was going to happen, that we would find out when she has when she came out, if that made
Yeah.
sense.
And also throughout pregnancy, it changes weekly pretty much because when I was pregnant with my daughter, she has a heart defect, and every single week it kept getting better and better, actually. And I mean, at least in the book, that's not what I talk about. I kind of talk about how it gets worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's like every pregnancy is different. It really depends on the mom and what she does in order to make things better,
Mm-hmm.
because health and exercise are super important when it comes to being pregnant.
Right. And so going forward with I guess, and this is obviously, if this is not something that you'd like to talk about when it comes to me posting this podcast, how how does it affect you? I don't know anything about having what you have specifically. So how does that affect your day-to-day life? Does it affect you in any way? Because to me, it doesn't seem like, right. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of what I thought, because I mean, it,
So I pretty much just have mosaicism Down syndrome, which means just a small percentage. And my mom knew about it super early in her life and told me about it, but I don't have anything. My health is perfect except for my hearing, but that has nothing to do with it. And I mean, I had one learning disability growing up, but I pretty much gave it the middle finger and said, well, I'm not going to let that deter me. So it really depends on the person, because every person who has Down syndrome is different, because there are three types of it.
mm-hmm.
It's and so each one is definitely different. And I chose, you know, when it came to Lorelai, I chose not to figure out which type she has because it doesn't matter.
It
I love
doesn't
her.
matter. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and that's really cool. I really, yeah. So I think for me specifically, the book spoke to me in another way too, because so I was diagnosed with ADHD back in the 90s, back when I was in elementary school. And I know that doesn't seem like anything, but at the time, ADHD was pretty much handled as if you had a learning disability. So I grew up in middle school, I mean, elementary school, middle school, and even most of high school going to special needs classes. And, you know, kind of being stuck in these rooms that kind of looked like broom closets. They were all, you know, there was only like maybe 5 of us, and we'd be in these little broom closets, no windows or anything like that. And I had tons of friends that were all in classes together, and I was kind of stuck with people that needed it, and that was fine, but I wasn't really friends with most of them, and not for any other reason that I just wasn't friends with them. And you know, it was difficult for me. I grew up not having the education that I think I deserve to have. And I think, you know, and I don't blame anybody, because I think it was just the way it was handled at that time. And I think that has changed, or at least I'm hoping it has. I don't really know if it has or not, but it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult to grow up that way. So, did you have to have any kind of situations like that, or were you able to kind of,
I did.
yeah,
Yep. So I was in some mainstream classes growing up. And I mean, other than that, I was bored. I was like, I know all of this stuff, and you're dumbing it down for me, even though I know what you're talking about. So I kind of put matters into my own hands. I actually went to vocational high school in Lowell, And there, I kind of just, I kept going to my guidance counselor. I was like, look, it's like, I know my IEP says this, but trust me, I know what I'm doing. I know what the teacher is saying. And I kept going to her until I was in like AP English because they were putting me in the IEP English classes. And I was like, no. And I mean, it's like, even with other people, you said you have ADHD. My husband has the same thing. And every person is so different because he actually was in mainstream classes. He didn't have to be outside and like you're in the broom closet classroom. He was mainstream and he had teachers that weren't able to really get to him. So I also think it depends on the school system.
It does, yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. I really do, because I think that some of it did help me, some of it did. But I mean, I remember specifically being in high school and learning the same vocabulary words almost every week, and I'm like, oh my god, if I have to learn engulfed one more time. And the thing was is that we would get the vocabulary words for the week on Monday, and people would be like, oh, engulfed, I wonder what that means. I'm like, we learned it in the last 2 weeks. We've already learned it. Why are we doing this again? And then, of course, there were times where I was in, as you would say, mainstream classrooms, and it was difficult for me. I am a slow learner, but once I got it, like, I mean, I had it. It's just that it would take me extra time. And I wish I had done what you had done and kind of advocated for myself more, because I didn't. And I think to a certain extent, my laziness took advantage of being in those classes, because when all of my friends would spend hours upon hours doing homework, I would go home and I'd be able to watch a million episodes of television, and then I'd call them and be like, hey, you want to hang out? And they're just like, dude, I have like 6 hours worth of homework. And it's just like, I had maybe 30-45 minutes worth of homework. So I did take advantage of it. So I mean, I did do that. But then I went to college and I started getting a better education. And I mean, you can't tell that I've had any like less learning than anybody else. And that's also because I'm not book smart, but I am. I was built with common sense, so which I think might be even better than having having book smarts, because I do know a lot of people that have book smarts that are actually not very smart sometimes.
Exactly. You have to, do what you have to do.
Yeah. So, is there anything else about the book that you kind of want people to maybe concentrate on if they do end up picking it up?
Um, I really enjoyed doing after Suki was born, just because so many people will say, oh, yeah, postpartum depression and anxiety are real, but no one really talks about it and the feelings that come with it. I mean, it's like I really struggled with anxiety, especially with the health ailments of a baby, because when you're a new mom, you really don't think, oh, like my baby has an appointment. A baby with a health condition, my first week home, at least with my daughter, every single day she had an appointment at the hospital, and we would spend at least 3 hours there for it. And not many people know that. But another thing I want people to know is that even though it may seem bleak, sometimes life just opens up a door that you knew never existed, and it's amazing.
Right. And it's also that part where everybody's going through it. Maybe we're not everybody's talking about it, but those
Mhm.
insecurities, everybody's feeling it. I mean, and I think especially moms. I think especially moms, there's kind of low standards for men, to be honest with you. For fathers, there's low standards for fathers. I remember uh, with the first week of my daughter being born, we went to Old Navy to get some newborn clothes because we just didn't have enough at the time. And I stood in front of the door while my wife was going through the checkout line, and I'm just standing there with Lana Catherine. And this woman comes up to me and goes, "You are such a good dad," and then walked away. I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm literally just standing here." Like, I should have been like, "Oh, that's so nice," but I was just like, I'm not doing anything, you know, and I get accolades because I'm a stay-at-home dad, you know, but the only reason I think my wife gets accolades is because she exceeds the expectations of what a mother should be doing. And the only reason for that is because she's going and doing 1 to 2 24-hour shifts a week, and then also working on top of that another 30 to 40 hours, and then coming home and still spending time with us and going out to breakfast with us after a 24-hour shift, and doing all those things. But I mean, other than that, are people that are also exceeding expectations really? I mean, mothers getting that kind of recognition? I don't think so.
I think it's honestly both parties, and I say that just because I mean that's my husband's desk. He's a high school, middle school teacher, and he's getting his master's. He's taking 2 classes, and even though sometimes he's in here doing so much work for both things, he still spends time with our daughter and is able to do things like cook dinner and be with us. I mean, I just started a full time job last week, so it took me a year to start working full time. And I mean, even though moms do get credit, and I mean, there is that whole sexuality of, oh, well, moms should be doing the job of taking care of the baby and whatnot, but it's a team effort. And I feel like so many people don't realize how much team effort it takes, and also especially with a baby with the needs, with the health conditions. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. Like, okay, who's going to go to that appointment or who's going to this appointment, especially if both parents are working full time. Some parents might not be able to get through it. They might fight a lot, but if you have a solid foundation with your significant other, I feel like anyone can get through any hard time.
Right. And I did notice that a lot throughout the book, you discussing that Jackie's husband, Dean, was extremely supportive. Now, I kept waiting for that scene where there was like this big blowout, and like, I'm doing as best as I can, and yeah, but you're not doing enough, and you know, something that you would typically see in
Mm-hmm.
a fictional book, you know what I mean, or even a non-fictional book. It's something that does seem to happen, especially when you have a newborn, and putting on top of that all of the medical issues that this child is having. I can see the parents butting heads and asking for support, asking for help with each other, and having some disagreements. There were a couple of, I thought, very minor. It felt very minor to me, some of the disputes that they had. At least that's just how it felt for me. Is that something, like, tell me a little bit about that.
I actually based it off of my relationship because, I mean, my husband and I mean, we're kind of opposite. So we're going to butt heads occasionally, but we both have the same mindset of, even though we might not see eye to eye on this, we still love each other at the end of the day. And we like, and at least when it comes to us, one of us will realize, oh, well, I was on the wrong. And then we go up to them and say, well, it was my fault. I'm sorry. And then we're fine. And so I kind of based that off of Jackie and Dean because even though relationships will always have fights, which is healthy, it's also healthy to move past it and learn and grow together.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with that. And I think, you know, I think there was a learning curve for my wife and I. I think we were going through quite a lot. There was a lot going on when we had the birth of my child, and mostly that was myself. I was going through a lot of anxiety and mental issues and depression and stuff like that. It almost kind of seemed like it almost looked like I had postpartum to a certain extent from what I was going through. And that is something that does happen. There is postpartum for men,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And it was very difficult. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we were still there for each other and we were still working together. But our disagreements, I'm not sure, were as tame. They were never like outrageous or anything like that, but they weren't as tame. So that's kind of cool, though, to a certain extent, for me to read that and see some of those disputes handled the way that they were. I really thought that was very interesting.
I mean, I know every relationship is different. I mean, there are so many people that look at my husband and I and go, wow, you guys are so good together. And it's really just because of communication.
Yeah, and that's so
All about
key.
that.
Hmm.
Communication is key to a relationship and honesty.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm very blunt, and sometimes he doesn't like it, but he loves it.
Yeah, I mean, and being blunt is sometimes what you have to do, and as long as you're being blunt in a certain way, I mean, there are people, as I said, that actually need to have a filter that don't. That can be very hard, and they can be very harsh and those can be very difficult. But if you are going to be blunt, but you're also going to do it in a way that is just as an adult, to a certain extent, have an adult conversation with somebody and be like, listen, this is what I need from you, or listen, this is how I'm feeling right now, then the other person should be able, again, if it's handled that way, should be able to be like, okay, then this is what I need from you, and let's meet in the middle, or whatever it might be, and be able to take it from there. So, yep.
Exactly.
So, is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we finished today?
No, that's what I wanted to mention, at least about my book. What
Yeah.
about you, Dad?
Well, I think for me, as I said, I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed the honesty, and that definitely shines through for your personality. And I'm hoping that this will open up conversation for people to maybe see that you get a phone call from somebody being like, hey, I'm pregnant, and maybe finding some time within that 9 months to help that person out with a little bit of that information of what to expect, because it needs to be talked about, it needs to be discussed, so that not only the mother can be prepared, but also the father, because again, a lot of the physical stuff that needed to happen outside of breastfeeding is left up to the father until the mother can be healed. and
Hmm.
and do you ever really fully heal from something like that? A lot goes into your body to have to be pregnant and to give birth. And I mean, is my wife fully healed from that? I would say no. I mean, there's been lasting effects from that, and again, it's not talked about. It's not talked about. And I remember my aunt Ellen saying, like, if you have a group of women in their over the age of 40 that have all had children and everybody's laughing, you know that at least one of them is peeing their underwear right now.
Yep. That's so true. Honestly, my bladder is not the same.
Yeah. And to a certain extent, females already had a harder time holding their bladder than men do. So you put on top of pregnancy and giving birth. I mean, it's just unfair, is what it is.
It really is. There are so many times I look at my husband, I'm like, I wish we could trade places.
Oh my gosh, I went to a haunted house with some people, and I was making them laugh so hard because I was so scared. I was literally screaming and running away from all these people, and the person that I was with was laughing so hard that by the time we left, their pants were soaked, because they'd had a child, and they just were just like, you have to stop making me laugh, I'm peeing, I'm peeing, I'm peeing. And I just felt so bad, but I couldn't help it because I was just absolutely scared to death of being in there, because I'm a little scaredy pants. So yeah, well, Beth, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it, and again, I appreciated your book. Tell me, where can people go to order this book if they're interested?
As of right now, just Amazon.
Hmm.
I am trying to work on Barnes and Noble,
Oh, that's
but
awesome.
right now it's just Amazon.
Okay, so you can get a physical hardcover copy, paperback.
So you can get a paperback, or you can also get an ebook. So,
Right, and
um,
that's what I did. I kept this in my back pocket, and anytime I had a moment, I would literally read like maybe a paragraph, and then my daughter would come over and bother me. So,
Well, that's what I do.
yes, but I did try to get through it as quickly as I could so we could get this interview going. So I really appreciate. I really did thoroughly enjoy the book. So everybody, I will put the link to the actual page on Amazon onto the description of this video. Again, thank you so much for coming in, and thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thank you everyone for tuning in and growing with me. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, even things you want to educate me on, please email me at roomtogrowwithchad@gmail.com. I hope to hear from you. See you when I see you.